but I do know that it does work. And all that is to say, for those that do that, we do commend you because it's a way of being more efficient, getting ready for the week, but also trying to ensure that you're able to save your money. You may go shopping on Wednesday. I know that some stores still have the 5% or the 10% in some cases. If you're a senior, there are other days where you can go. And the government now has a website whereby you can go and look at that. I forget what the website is, but you can go there and you can see all the stores or those that are agreeing to participate in the government program. You can see where the savings are. And I smile because if you go back in the day, as I say, people would drive around from shop to go, for example, one store might have the cheapest chicken, somewhere else might have the cheapest rice. But then I used to smile because you use up a lot of gas by doing that. However, at least psychologically, you have a sense of I'm saving myself some money, and that even goes a long way. And so again, thanks again for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight, where we're just saying that, parents are doing what they got to get done, even children and students and everybody else, even seniors. We all have a plan. I know, again, there are people that are overseas that listen in, and I know, because they told me already, that they will plan their Sunday evening. So around this time, they'll stop, get tea and crumpets, as I call it, which means some sort of dessert, and they'll sit off and listen. And others have been sending in messages and questions already for tonight's show. And so again, I want to welcome the minister. I want to welcome MP Doug Decudo. He told me don't call him honorable, so I won't do that.
I think I am.
It's reserved to a minister. I got that. But we call him MP Decudo.
I am honorable. just not entitled.
And for those that are looking on Facebook, you can see his pleasant smile as he let us know that he is honorable, even though he may not be entitled to be called honorable from the House Assembly point of view. The other thing I want to do before I start is there has been lots of commentary in the public about overall healthcare costs, and I made comments on this show even before when the August and BF&M announced that they were going to be a merger or a buyout, as the case may be. I spoke, and actually others have spoken out quite vociferously and quite aggressively rather, in terms of their thoughts around the consolidation, in that ultimately it will cause an increase in expenses for healthcare. I've made comments also in terms of you can't criticize what they're doing in terms of increasing their own client base. However, the idea that one firm can say that if you insure with us, you have a zero deductible, obviously going to encourage people to come and buy. Also, what they did was they bought up lots of the individual practices. So now the combined offshores have a significant portion of the healthcare providers in Bermuda. And then this week, of course, they announced that they were going to cause us all to go to one pharmacy for certain prescriptions. And that raised some alarm. I did see a letter I think I saw a public letter from the Doctors Association, which also opposed it in terms of the general consolidation is going to result in less choice and also increased cost. And also now I saw in the letter that there is an increase of administration because you have to do some extra work now to make sure there's not a clash in your various prescriptions. And all that to say that the minister there the Honorable Kim Wilson gave a ministerial statement on Friday to say that she's requesting or asking or telling the offshores to ensure that they don't go ahead with what they're proposing to do and instead to press pause. And so I thought it was quite interesting in terms of it's now reached ahead. We didn't say too much, generally speaking, in terms of causing the BF&M in August not to join together. And I knew at that point in time, there was no legislation to stop it taking place, and so there was nothing for them to do. But now, the government has spoken forward, and so we want to commend both the minister, the government, and all others in terms of what they're trying to do now in terms of stopping, or at least trying to press pause, to really see the implications of the proposed consolidation. And also, by the way, the regulator, the Bermuda Health Council, should have some comments, and I would look forward to see what they do say. And so I'll open up by saying to MP Decudo, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, Anthony, I'm glad, actually. So first of all, you might have heard this one. A failure to plan is a plan to fail.
Yes, sir.
Your opening comments were right on. Mm-hmm. And I know when I go to the shop, I buy what's on the list and I don't buy anything else.
Do you? Okay, good.
Well, because you'll be there all day.
Yes.
Also, don't go hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes. No, but seriously, this health insurance thing, this is huge. Now, so first of all, right, you guys say, the OBA, you're all about business, this, that, and that. Well, we're about, sort of free markets, competition, let people duke it out in the market. We're not naturally pro-regulation, we want to support private enterprise, all that. But this is a different situation. And for those who had their ears on Friday, mm-hmm. you may have noticed that in our budget reply, we actually proposed to regulate the local insurance companies' rates, as well as their ownership of medical practices and how they deal with the pharmaceuticals. Now I know people say, "Oh, Dakudo, you just said that because the minister said it." But you can go print out our book.
Sure.
And that book actually was written and went to the printer before this All Shores pharmacy thing was even announced. And it's not rocket science for us to come up with that idea, because we recognize that it's not going to work right when one company can dominate the market like that. And that's why Belco is regulated. So that's the OBA. We're glad to hear that the minister is getting on with this. And additionally, we propose to also regulate the insurance rates, not just for the health, but also for the, your car, your automobiles, right?
Auto insurance,
your vehicles,
okay,
and your house, because this happens a lot in the States, right? In California, wherever, people who sell consumer insurance, when they want to change their rates, they have to file a rate plan with their state regulator, right? Now, it doesn't mean the rates don't go up.
Right.
But what it does mean is that the regulator will look at it and say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Is it based in the data? Is it based in your actual costs? It's not just arbitrary raising the rates because you can.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean necessarily things will be cheaper because sometimes the costs are what they are. But it does mean consumers could be confident that they've been vetted and checked and are fair as they could be.
That's interesting. So we'll come back to that, because that is obviously a big topic, health insurance or health care period. And I will say this before I go off that point, is that I was pleasantly surprised to note that in Florida, at least, for both auto insurance and health insurance, that there's a law in place whereby they're required to actually give a rebate if their profits are too high. And I know that because a person that I know quite well, they actually received a rebate for both the car insurance and the health insurance. And I was like, what happened? Explain to me why. And they were able to show me that there was a law in place that says that you must rebate if to certain policyholders in the event that your profits are too high. Clearly, there's a lot behind that, a lot of mechanism behind that, but that's what it is. And so, again, let's now go back and say good evening to Dr. Dakudo, MP Dr. Dakudo, the Shadow Minister of Finance. My question that I always start with is, introduce yourself in a way you would like to be introduced, because we think we know everybody, because we're so small, but we don't. So let's go for that.
Well, first of all, Anthony, thank you for having me on the show. I feel like I was just here because you were kind enough to have me on last year. So I just turned 50 last year.
50, okay.
Yeah, born Bermudian, obviously. I lived in the States for a while. So sometimes, especially when I moved home, people are like, "Oh, how long are you going to be down for?" You know what I mean? Hey, man, come on.
Okay, sure.
I work in insurance about 20 years now. I got a background I got a doctorate in computer science, a PhD in computer science. So I'm not a medical doctor.
Okay.
I'm a sort of a technical guy. That's how I got started in industry. I've got an 11-year-old, I've got a 13-year-old, and I have an almost 23-year-old daughter. My 13-year-old, he's wearing size 12, and he's just about 6 feet. So I don't know, he got that from his mother's side, I guess. So we're a pretty busy family between, what the boys are up to, trying to keep up with what my daughter's up to. She lives overseas. My wife works. I have a full-time job, and then trying to do the work of being a good constituency MP. So for those who don't know, I was elected. My first time to be elected to Parliament was in February, and I was in the Senate for about 2.5 years before then.
And what about schooling? Just as people like to know.
Right, yeah. I went away to school in around what you call like M3, they call it now, or in the States.
M3 is fine.
7th grade.
Right.
Then I was off to boarding school, and then university, and then graduate school, all in the New England area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. And how did you come to be the MP, like especially from a finance point of view, for the OBA?
Well, that's a great question too. Probably within my team, we have a pretty broad team. We have people all different backgrounds. We've got doormen, we've got farmers, we've got electricians, we've got IB people, we've got different types of professionals. My skill set really was more on the probably of that team. I'm probably the most financial skill set. I sort of do that. Insurance is similar, and I also have some educational training and a bit of work experience in finance per se.
Okay.
So that was a natural a natural fit for my sort of professional skills and my background.
Okay. And then just a little bit before that, what attracted you to become a politician, period?
Sure. It's actually kind of a funny story. So,
Sure.
The first part's not funny. So, look, Bermuda's been good to me, right? It's been good to my family. It was good to my parents. It's been good to my wife's parents. And, you have to give back.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people in Bermuda give back in a lot of different ways. They're coaching, they're volunteering, they're in their churches. For me, I just felt that politics, policy, that kind of stuff was an area that would be best suited to me. I'm not really like a soup kitchen kind of a guy. It just is what it is.
Right.
Now, what was it? When did we have that? Was it 2020? I got asked. My cousin is Trevor Munnis.
Okay.
So we had the same grandmother. No, our grandmothers were sisters, I think, something like that. Or his grandfather was brother to my grandmother, right?
Sure.
So, they had that snap election. They needed somebody to run, and I originally ran in 27 against Colonel Birch. And I'm a sailor, and I had been out on my Wednesday night sailing. And there's a race series. We race all summer. The point's that we had a good night. So we were back having a little celebration, right? So I was feeling very...
under the influence, gotcha.
No.
And it's okay.
No.
You weren't drinking and drive. That's the main thing.
I didn't say I was under the influence. But I was feeling very good.
Yeah.
Very joyful. You called me up. You said, hey, look, man, can you do this? It'll be over in 5 weeks. It had been something in the back of my mind, right?
Okay.
And I said, well, all right, let me go. I went home. I said to my wife, I said, sweetie, it'll all be over in 5 weeks, I promise. Anyway, here we are 5 years later, right?
Fair enough, okay.
That's how I kind of got hooked in. And it was always in the back of my mind, but that's the specific thing that happened that got me into the OBA and got me, working in Warwick. And then I worked in 27 for that month and a half, and then I moved over to 25, Warwick Northeast.
Gotcha. Okay. Again, congratulations. I mean, it's interesting because for those that don't get in politics, they have various opinions and whatever, right? But it's interesting to understand what motivates us to do so, and to recognize, as you said earlier, it's a lot of work. It's not as if you do this full time, for example, and you have nothing else to do. You have all those things depend upon your lifestyle. You got a job, you got a family, you got children that do different things, and you have to be able to manage all those things. And now, for the next few weeks now, you have to be in the house almost every other day, every other weekday rather, to get things done. And so again, we do congratulate you for putting your time aside.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so now let's get to the budget. I'll give you a little while, I guess, to go through what you want to go through, and then I'll come back and ask some questions. I'll let you know for sure. One of my personal interests is going to be around the whole corporate income tax. Personally, I believe that underscores the entire budget process this year around. And obviously, listening to the debates, the comments, and your reply and the initial budget, that did feature quite a bit. And so, but I'll let you go through first of all and repeat those things that you want to emphasize from your perspective based upon your reply on Friday.
Sure. And I'm going to keep it very high level because I know with your callers and stuff, they're going to come up with a lot of great questions. And,
sure.
And you already talked about you have some questions.
Okay.
So, look, the high level view is, hey, this budget is okay. Right? Just let me say that because I know I got a lot of flack based on my reply on Friday. This budget's okay. But I'm going to put, and that concerns us a little bit because
And it was introduced last year when they first started making the payments, and now more money is being paid. Yeah. And so for the listening audience again, we talk about it being variable, which for me, I always smile because we know it's variable because it's insurance. And so this year you might make, I don't know, $1 billion, and next year you might make $500,000 or zero or a loss for that matter. So there are big swings, but we all understand that. And so my question to you is, do you want to make any other comments about that? Because we understand it's going to be variable from this year to the next. And I think in the budget, I know that they've talked about the fact of being careful and not using it all up in one sense.
Yeah, I was actually very glad to hear the government with that message, because for those who've been paying attention to the things I've been talking about since the CIT was first announced, that's actually the message that we've had, because we did a lot on the OBA. My colleagues and I, we did our own research, we did our own meetings with the industry people, and we want to understand. So actually, it is a little funny because when I hear the government budget statement this year, I felt like I was hearing back things that I'd been saying the prior years. But if you were to listen to what the government would have been saying around 2 or 3 years ago, it was like kind of a different message. You know, the money is going to solve all the problems. So very glad to, in that sense, I feel very successful in that, you know, between comments that we've been making and others out there, the government is getting that message. I mean, you mentioned about Bermuda being lucky about getting the CIT. Absolutely. We really are lucky.
Well, lucky was my word, by the way, because I remember that even in the house on Friday, right? It was interesting because sometimes,
can we just admit we're lucky, man?
I'm saying,
you know, it's like, okay.
There was a lot of conversation in terms of is it luck or otherwise, and I suppose we did not dictate, that's for sure. It was initiated by the OECD, and then there was a lot of work done to make sure that it's now structured properly. That's the point.
And actually, I did want to say something, because you said, the government wasn't really involved in like making it happen here. Actually, you know, I give we my colleagues and we're on the record for this. We do give the government a lot of credit for executing this well, right? The people in the ministry, the working with the industry groups. There was a very collaborative.
Yes.
And to be honest, I give them credit because I kind of contrasted, in my opinion, to how some other issues in Bermuda are being handled. Frankly, because this one was done really well. And I wish other things could be done as well. You know, let's be honest. The OECD is not out to help Bermuda. We are a major global competitor to their insurance industries.
Yes.
And just because they say we should not be able to compete on tax, I don't agree with. You know why? Because all those other countries have big, diversified economies.
Yes.
It's not our fault we don't have oil or manufacturing, right? So competing on tax, that's what we do. Bermuda has always been hustling, right? Go back to, go back
pirates,
to the salt, the pirates. I mean, and of course we have to talk about slavery. Of course, I mean that's not why we're here. But then you had the wars, you had the gun running, right? You had we helped spearhead the modern tourism industry. Then we had the bases, and then we had the second version of the modern tourism industry, and then we had the kind of modern international business offshore industry.
Yes.
Because we had to.
We lead the way.
We had to lead the way. We had to be nimble, be creative. So we're always adapting. And so why is it fair for the OECD to take that tool away from us? But so they have. So yes, great, we're going to get this money. But I'm not going to lie, it's going to be harder for us to compete. Because why are companies here, right? I think of it as like, I think it was like a tripod, right?
Sure.
Tax. Okay, let's be honest, tax. 2, the BMA, great internationally. Huge regulator. The top 2 people, and many others, but definitely the top 2 people at the BMA are Bermudians. They are professionals working at the top levels internationally, okay, and they set the standard with their staff. And then we're close to the United States, so it's easy for people to come here. It's a nice place to live. There are people who like to be here.
Yeah.
The problem when you take the tax thing out is it starts to cloud the mix, because at the end of the day, right, if you're a CEO and you have your board meeting, at the end of the day, it's about the numbers. Now, when the numbers worked well, the CEO could say things like, look, I like Bermuda, so I'm just going to figure out how to hire some more people here. I want to hang out here. My kids like it. When you start to take out that financial advantage, it gets more complicated.
But that should be, that's an interesting conversation, because I have never actually accepted the fact that they're here for tax reasons purely. Yes, it's
purely,
right. It's one aspect, right? But the reality is, and I know from my own experience, right, that it's beautiful and it's easy in terms of I have an insurance question or business question, and literally within, like, say, I don't know, maybe walking less than a mile, you can actually get to people and get to a solution. And so it's not as if, okay, fine, I live in, I don't know, New York, and you live in California somewhere, I'm going to fly cross country, and then in the US you have all different states and different laws. And so there's a lot more to being here than the tax piece of it, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not the normalization of the tax does in fact have an impact. And from what I understand so far, it hasn't. So it's not as if people are now leaving and some are coming to the Bermuda. So we'll see now over the long term whether that neutralization of the tax does have an impact or not. But there are many other things for sure. And one of the things I know is the question of being able to, and you're in the insurance industry, you know that the ability to actually touch base real quick is a big part of it. Then of course it's our safety, and like you said, it's the proximity to the US, all those kind of things. And I also, by the way, I use this terminology, which is Bermuda is the world's meeting place, in that you can live in the East Coast or wherever you live, right? Get up in the morning, have breakfast, fly to Bermuda, have a necessary meeting. If somebody lives in Europe, they can come the night before, have your meeting, and be back home for dinner. So you can have your breakfast and dinner at home, but still come to Bermuda and transact a full day's business and get it done. So there are other things, and as you know, in terms of the attractiveness, but I will be looking to see the degree to which there's now normal taxation does or does not change the business environment.
Well, we're all going to be watching very, very closely.
Gotcha. And do you have any information thus far, though, to say or to see what the impact has been that companies have left because of just this?
I don't know that. I do know companies have concerns.
Yes.
Let me explain. It costs them a lot to hire people in Bermuda.
Yep.
To find the talent, because they'll say be looking at they can hire in London. London is the world's insurance marketplace. All those things you mentioned we have in Bermuda, they have there. They call the square mile.
Yes.
It's full of talent. The thing is they don't have good weather and they have very high taxes, right?
Exactly, yes.
So,
yes.
But they have all the expertise. So they want to bring people here. Well, they prefer, actually, people like to knock IB, right? And it's a big thing. So obviously there are some IB people who are not going to give Bermudians a good shake. But let's just face it.
Sure.
There's also Bermudians who are lazy because people are people. But a lot of companies would prefer to hire a Bermudian. You know why? No work permit, no trying to convince the person's partner to come here, no running around trying to find them housing or figure out what to do with the schools. They're less likely to get up and go back.
Correct.
It's actually much easier if they can find the person with the right skill set.
Yes.
But we know there's a lot of areas where they can't certain specialty lines for underwriters, actuaries. It is what it is, right?
Yes.
It's very hard to get those people here because now we're competing with hiring in London, Dubai, a lot of other places, and these potential employees, the companies have to even if I'm hiring a person in London, I have a team at work, right? Most of them are in London. Even if I'm hiring a person in London, I'm competing with other companies in London, so I have to move fast.
Oh yeah, yes, no question.
It's the guy. So here, the company has to go through the immigration process. People have contracts. They have to give 3 or 6 months notice, and that's sort of the UK and Bermuda system for certain higher level jobs.
Yeah.
And so it can be very hard for them to kind of be confident that they can get the work permit in time and get the person hired. The partners looking at the schools. All these things.
No, I got you. I mean, it's not easy, that's for sure.
No. And so we have to get our game up.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. And different conversation, right? But in terms of people know my perspective in that as Bermudians, we have to up our game, as you say, because we're not competing necessarily with other Bermudians, we're competing with those around the world. And as a company, as an employer, I want the best. And yes, like you said, there are some reasons to hire Bermudians, but I'm not going to hire Bermudian just because I'm going to hire the person that's the best. There is the advantage of you're already here, like you said, and the other aspects, I ain't got to worry about a work permit or whatever, but you still need to be a good employee.
Yes.
So I take that. But going back to the whole issue of the corporate income tax, so now are you settled that the amount is huge? Because, Justin, obviously I was an MP before, and I knew that the discussion was the numbers would be very, very high, but no one wanted to say it publicly. And I was pleasantly surprised this year around when the budget came out, because now at least the government is saying what it is. It's much more than they had budgeted for in 2025, 26. And now, like you said, the number's huge.
Well, you can't compare last year to this year. Let me explain.
No, I'm talking in terms of they put the number in.
Oh, this is because it was 600 and now it's come around like 700.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why. It was a really good year for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like no hurricanes, no earthquakes, things like that. The insurance market, for those who follow this stuff, is coming a bit off of a peak.
Yeah.
So in fact, it's been a very good year, but the industry is kind of starting to come off the peak, and it's going to be tightening its belt.
Yes, and that's a good point, buddy.
And sorry, the last section.
Sure.
Not only did we not have really any big hurricanes, earthquakes last year, it's been a historically low period of a couple years compared to what we ought to expect or plan for on average.
And I think it's good because for the listening audience to understand that what everybody agrees with now is that this year in a cycle is probably one of the best years for insurance, period. And it's in the budget also, by the way, in terms of there isn't the expectation for this high number to carry on, for an extended period of time. However, my point is that the number is much higher than we all thought it was going to be, at least to be spoken about publicly. Because I know from like maybe 18 months ago, the number of 700 million was known, was put out there, but there was the resistance to speak about it publicly because it's number one, it's such a big number, and number two, there is the uncertainty around the number. But now, as you say, it's come to fruition. But my question, I guess, for you is: are you comfortable now with the current estimates as to what they expect to receive from the whole CIT this go around?
Not really, because we're just in the beginning. Like, it's very transitionary.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a question. I actually have this official question out to the government, and they haven't answered it.
Okay.
And I've asked several times. Like, how many companies will be paying the bulk of it?
Okay.
Because if it's like 10 companies, well, you got to treat every company very carefully.
Yes.
But if it's evenly spread around 100 companies, you're much more robust, right?
Yes. Okay.
And that means, if it's only 10 companies, but like one company gets grumpy and leaves, that's a huge impact.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two, how many different industries? Is it really all insurance companies, in terms of dollars mostly? Or is it more spread out across, shipping, liquor, insurance, community? We don't know. And again, I put that question in. I might find out on Monday, actually, if they actually answer it. They haven't answered it prior times. Because, again, like, the government could come back and say, there's going to be like 50 to 80 different companies, really spread out around a couple of different industries. We'd be like, okay, I feel much more comfortable.
Gotcha.
If they came back and said, actually, 80% of it is paid by 6 companies and they're all insurance companies, I'm going to say, well, you better get each one of those a special concierge and a hotline to the minister.
Sure.
Right?
But even with your own information, right? You OBA, otherwise, you don't have no idea.
We don't have information.
No, I mean in terms of just industry knowledge, for example.
Oh.
As to how many are captured by that number, 720 euro. You don't have a sense yourself as to, not you personally, but you based upon your research.
Well, to be frank, our research says that there may be a large number of companies or high tens, but most of the money is coming from very few. That's what our research tells us.
Okay, so you anticipate it's very concentrated.
Yes, but that's why we're asking the official question for the government, which they've refused to answer twice now.
Okay.
So hopefully third time lucky on Monday, and we'll find out. Because
you say Monday because on Monday you're going to debate finance?
No, because I had a parliamentary question in, which I know you know how those work.
Sure.
And again, it will really change how we think about it, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, that's going to be interesting to see. Clearly do, and I think it's important. Actually, Premier, he was there last week, in terms of, he said that he wanted, everybody wants the CIT to be non-accretive in terms of you don't want to have a situation whereby companies are paying their existing tax plus the CIT.
Yes.
And so there's a process, there's a plan to actually adjust those things, but not right now because they want to be mindful of the impact, as you say, to understand the certainty of the CIT before they do that, because you don't want to get to a point whereby you say, guess what, stop paying tax A and CIT goes to zero and then you're stuck.
That's right.
And so I think we can accept that the government, obviously that's the wrong word, but everybody understands the uncertainty around the CIT. And I think from what I've read so far, the government has understood it and planned for it now in terms of those three things. One is going to be the stabilization fund. The second one is going to be what exists already, which is the sinking fund, and then the sovereign wealth fund. And so, are you comfortable with those three buckets?
Yes, and we also have proposed a stabilization fund.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest, once you start talking to people about this, it's not a rocket science idea. So,
yes.
And in my reply, we supported that. The sinking fund, obviously, that's a standard thing. Basically, when you have leftover money, you put it in the sinking fund, and that's your kitty to pay the debt when the debt comes due.
Mm-hmm.
The sovereign wealth fund, it's a nice idea.
Yep.
But I think we're about 10 years out from it. And the reason is because we have $3.5 billion of debt. Mm-hmm. We have about $2 billion of pension liabilities and social insurance that needs to be shored up.
Okay.
We have the healthcare things, right, that a lot of issues. So I think, and I already mentioned how we're not even really on track to pay down our full amount of debt that's due by early 2030. Mm-hmm. So my line in the budget reply was, the government just needs to really get focused on this debt. Don't get distracted by the sovereign wealth fund right now. We can pick that up later when we're feeling a little more solid, because it's going to be transitionary. What are companies going to do? What's the industry going to do? What's the OECD going to do?
Yes.
It's not like, the way the OECD works, it's not like there's a rule book, they print it out, and you can be like,
changes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, check. They kind of hang back, and you propose something,
yes,
and they go, oh, that's not what we meant.
Yeah, got it, okay.
You see what I mean?
Sure.
So we may get some pushback like that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'll be told by the premier, "Oh, Dekuto, you're gonna jeopardize our sensitive OECD negotiations." There are always going to be sensitive OECD negotiations because they do not like us making money.
Clearly. I'm going to do an exception and take a call this early, but good evening, caller. Welcome to Inside. What's your question or comment?
Good evening. How are you? Have a good evening and a good budget year. The premier said last year's budget was $1 billion, $430 million.
Yes.
For last year. He said the 2025 budget was surplus. Good. So shows that people, progressive by government, along the revenue members, good, right?
Yes.
But I think that Bermuda should set up a central government. For all this money, all this money is being made, $1 billion every year or more every year. It's good up. Okay, it's not like, it's just like the amount of seconds to a day, to a week, to a month, to a year, You're more seconds in a year, in a month. You're 360 days to a year. So how come they can't set up a central government? All the money that's being made in government every year.
Okay.
And how come there's billions of dollars? Okay, there are insurance and reinsurance up here. I don't know how many reinsurance comes up here, but they have money too. So government should set up a central government bank.
Okay.
Where's money going? It's for flying in space.
Okay, thank you, caller.
And then the government budget has gone up as one. It used to change pounds for those that didn't have a chance to convert pounds to $7,000, $1,070, as much as back then, even now. The budget back then, the first budget was $200 million.
Okay.
So, and they actually converted from to pounds to dollars. Okay. Back then, it was 3 or 600 for a pound to dollars.
Yes. I got you.
Or some say 40 cents. But right now, the budget is up 500% more.
Okay.
500% more. 95%, 10%, or 50% more.
Okay, cool.
10% more.
Let MP Dekuto comment and go from there, okay?
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye. Somebody actually put your mic closer, please.
Sure.
Sorry.
Let me do that. That's a good.
Sure, just try to summarize it as best I can. The caller is reflecting on the fact that primarily, I guess, well, not primarily, but one of his comments is that the government, not the government budget, but the government revenue is increasing quite significantly. And the government did say, we all know this, by the way, that for the first time, the overall government revenue will exceed $2 billion. And the caller's main point, he said the same thing last week, was, or is, why wouldn't government set up a central bank? I have my own comments about this, but I will let you make any comments about a central bank from the government side.
We use a Bermuda dollar that's backed by the U.S. dollar. So we'd have to change that whole setup.
Right.
We can't really set interest rates because we need U.S. dollars to buy things from overseas, and we're constantly have to convert or pounds or whatever. Yeah. We just got to convert our dollar to those things, and the banks here have to hold that foreign currency in reserve, right? And then, they'll sell it to you at the exchange rate plus a little bit of a tax and a fee, right? So I don't know, because we don't have really a currency that does its own thing versus other currencies. Yeah. I don't know that a central bank really makes sense, my view. We used to have exchange control, and we technically still do on the books. It's just sort of paused, if that makes sense. I don't know if people remember this. You wanted to, let's say you sent your child to university and you need to go get US dollars or pounds or whatever. You'd have to fill out a form. And say what it was for, and someone would have to approve that the bank could give you that foreign currency to go and pay that overseas tuition bill and then, room and board or whatever. So we don't do that anymore, although, technically...
The banks do, but yes.
Yeah, but...
but it's much more seamless.
No, it used to be you had to apply and they might say no.
Yeah.
Right? Now they just don't really say no, even though it's all on the books. So I don't know that a central bank is really going to solve any particular problems that we have.
Right.
I think the gentleman asked, where's all the money going? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Right. So the expenses for this year are around $1.4 billion, right? Not including capital. About $600 million of that is people, basically government employees. Another $400 million of that is grants.
Yep. So $1 billion based on people type thing.
Well, the grants, a lot of that goes to the hospital, but and then other types of grants, the Quangos and so forth. But a lot of it for the hospital. $130 million for interest, okay, and then $100 million of consultants in this year's budget. Like I said, doubled from 2 years ago, and then it kind of goes off from there. But those are the big meanings. So normally it's people. It's always the biggest cost, followed by the grants, and then currently interest, and then some other stuff after that.
Gotcha. And again, to the caller, thank you for calling in, as you always do. And also what I will say is that people sometimes don't understand or don't reflect the fact that a central bank is technically independent of the government. And Bermuda we don't have a central bank, as we know. People refer to the BMA as being the closest thing we have to a central bank in terms of its influence and regulatory powers over the banking system. Well, we don't have a central bank, and as you say, there's a lot that goes with that, and it would not necessarily be part of the government. The government takes in the revenue and spends it, and as you know, starting from tomorrow, you go through the tactical process by which you hold government feet to the fire for what they are putting the money aside to. And you just said also that the broad numbers are that the government will spend about $600 million on salaries, about $400 million on various grants, and the rest would be sundries. Obviously, the interest got to be paid off and whatever. So that's a comment there.
And consultants, which
you're going to obviously hammer from your comments already.
That's right. That's my job.
The $100 million that's being spent, and I'm sure the government will obviously respond in kind. We may go back to some other comments about the CIT, and I'm thankful that we talked about it this much thus far, because for me, it's been an interesting conversation. And for the government, both the government, big G, I guess, being the PLP and the OBA, to make sure that you have comments whereby the general public understands what you're talking about. And so, yes, it's variable. We know that because insurance, that's what it is, right? But the government has taken steps, as you say, but you agree with, in terms of, we understand because of the variability, you have to have a stabilization fund, which means that this year you make a ton of money, you put some aside, because next year we make less money, you can take some from this fund and make up your thing.
And let me be specific about that for people listening. Let's say you budget, I'm going to use 600 because that's what they got in the budget for next year.
Yes.
And only $500 million of CIT comes in. Well, the stabilization fund is supposed to hold from when the CIT fund comes in, CIT money comes in better than expected. You put some aside in the stabilization fund to make up for the years when it's less than expected.
Yeah.
important to note that it's not actually going to come into effect until like next year. And the reason being is we've got this $600 million of debt due around this time next year.
That's right, yeah.
There's no point putting the money in a stabilization fund because we're going to need it to pay that full debt down.
Gotcha.
That's just where we are today.
And if I may, there's also the comments in terms of the so-called the guardrails, in that 70% has to be used for paying down the debt and what have you. So do you have any uncertainty or disquiet about what the government's doing to actually utilize the CIT, because they've also said that based upon their own guardrails, the money cannot be used for normal expenses. It's got to be used for those things that are one-offs, I want to call them, as opposed to ongoing expenses.
We supported that. The one thing that they are including interest expense in that, and we don't really support that. And I'll tell you why. Well, let me modulate that.
Sure.
We have to do it now because the interest is so high. We want to get to a place where we can pay the interest down, so the interest expense is coming out of what we would call the normal budget.
Yes.
And the reason being is that will help keep a control on borrowing. Basically make it harder to borrow, or only borrow within your means, so that you can feel very confident that you can pay it down. So we propose a slightly different plan, which is, 3 to 5 years from now, you have to stop using CIT to pay for your interest expenses.
Okay, gotcha.
Like we recognize where we are today,
sure,
and saying like in the future we want to put a little pressure on the borrowing, and also just put a little back pressure on the spending. Okay, that's.
And so, obviously, paying down the debt next year, $605 million, means that the annual debt, the interest payment, is going to go from 125 to about maybe 80,000. I think it is, because it's going to save about, I think it's about $60 million in interest a year, give or take.
No, not that much. It's going to go to about 100. Let me just double check. We got the number right here, Anthony. Let me give you the exact number. It's going to go, according to the budget, it's going to go about 100.
Hold on, call. So say about 25 million, give or take.
That's correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's right.
And so over time, as they pay down the debt, that interest component is going to slow down anyway.
That's right. Exactly.
And what you want to do is take it out altogether, so that will force the interest to be paid out of the normal revenue.
That's right.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's
right.
right.
All right. Good evening, caller. This is an overseas call, I believe. Oh. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Inside. What's your question or comment?
Good evening, caller. This is overseas caller. Yes. Good evening. I'm Bermudian living overseas in Florida.
Sure.
Question or comment?
Turn your radio down there, please.
Okay, sure. Yes. Good evening. I'm Bermudian living overseas in Florida. Sure. Okay, so my comment relates to the fact that in Florida, what we've seen is companies, specifically insurance companies, that have high revenue amounts or high revenue projections. They play a shell game and create other companies to decrease their revenues and their profits below a threshold.
Yes.
To decrease their taxable liability from a profit point of view. So my question is, from a accounting perspective and really estimate perspective, Bermuda government, that revenue line is a major concern of projected revenue that we expect from the CIT. Because as we know, these corporations have a lot of great attorneys whose main primary role is to mitigate the tax liability.
Yes.
So have we given any thought to that? I think I understand that if it's a company making over $750 million, then they will be taxed on that basis. But quite frankly, I'm an entrepreneur, a business person. I have tax attorneys that mitigate that expense.
Yes.
So we got a lot riding on that number. So that's what my concern is.
I mean, now, you want to comment on the regime in terms that's been set up to collect the taxes?
Look, I think the caller pretty much laid it out pretty well. There is the Corporate Income Tax Agency. They will have people on staff whose job it is to do things like check the returns and where they need to, go get the records and do the audits. just like any tax agency. But the reality is also, just like any tax agency, like the caller said, the companies are going to have their own tax attorneys. They're going to have the best money can buy. And they're all going to be working hard to do everything within the law to avoid paying tax. That's what, in the United States, they use the word tax avoidance. That's illegal, doing everything legal, versus tax evasion, which is not paying taxes you're supposed to pay. So we also have to factor that in, and they're going to figure things out as we go. And so again, that's a part of my personal, let's just see what happens the next couple of years here as we all learn to see how the companies approach it. They're going to be very creative about it.
Yeah. And so, caller, yes, I think we understand that, and that's part of the process. Do you have any idea, MP Dukudu, the number of or the size of the regime that's been set up to collect the income tax?
Jeez.
I know they have a GM, that's for sure.
Yeah, I want to say it's supposed to end up like around 50 people. I don't actually know the numbers.
Sure.
It was supposed to be around the order. I want to say 50 to 70 people off the top of my head, and they weren't there yet. Last time I asked, they're still hiring.
Okay.
I think they are going to do a good job according to their plan. Like I said, there's a very good professional running it.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
Put together a very good team.
Yes.
Hopefully they'll get all the right people in place.
Sure. So, caller, thank you for that. And clearly, there is some uncertainty, but there are in place the professional guidelines and the legal guidelines to ensure that those that are supposed to comply will comply. And as was said last week, and I know it's said in the House Assembly also, that this is an international requirement, and so persons will try their best, which they should, to minimize their tax liability. But based upon all the estimates and the work that's been done, these are the numbers that's expected. That's why government has put it into the budget.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for calling. I appreciate you calling from overseas. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Insight. What's your question or comment?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Richardson and to Mr. Dukudu.
Now, be concise, please.
Okay, I'm going to be concise. I'm listening to you all this time, so you can listen to me.
No, hold on. Remember, I've got this red button, so be concise with your question or comment. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Let me do that, because you're blocking me already. No. The comment was just made about the lawyers are looking ways to be able to find out ways not to pay taxes, right?
Yes.
Looking at that now, when the government was discussing with these people and receiving the result that they got with the money that we're receiving, wouldn't they have been there from the beginning in the sense of that? And another thing, this tax that we are receiving is nothing that we ran out there and negotiated for in the sense of trying to get it. It came to us. That also needs to be taken into consideration as well. And, the scaremonger techniques I'm hearing in the sense that this may happen this way, and I think the government has already looked at that. This is why they are laying back and waiting to see how this goes. This is the first time we received this, and the minister, the Honorable Premier, Finance Minister, did mention that he is going to be taking it a bit at a time in the sense of that. But another thing I want to ask Mr. Dukudu, are you a Bermudian?
Why is that relevant?
Well, no, I want to ask it because he made a comment earlier that Bermudians are lazy.
No. Forget hold on. We're not going there.
You know it's a lot of books on that.
Skip that question, but keep going.
That's not what my comment was.
I'm just saying,
Okay, next. Listen, hold on. Ask me questions and stuff that relate to tonight's topic about the budget.
Okay, this is about the budget as well. If you're going to say Bermudians are lazy in the sense that we don't want to work.
No. What's the question about the budget? Quickly, come on.
We're not good people to hire. I'm just asking you to see Bermudian is in the same category.
Hold on. Let's go. Quickly, please. Be concise.
Okay, I'm being concise. I don't think it's fair for people like this gentleman here to call Bermudians lazy.
Okay, got that. You. Next question. That's it?
That's not what I said, but okay.
Thank you, caller. Appreciate that.
Let me just clarify my.
It's up to you.
I was saying.
Are you Bermudian? Answers yes.
Yeah, of course I'm Bermudian.
People don't know you anyway.
Look, what I was saying is, just like there's a stereotype of that of those evil IB people who never want to hire Bermudians or whatever. Of course, there must be people like that because they're people.
Yes.
And IB people, there's a stereotype that people think Bermudians are lazy. Like, I didn't make that up, man. You just go on Facebook, you're going to see Bermudians saying that.
Right.
It's not true.
Let's clarify,
people
right?
People are people.
There are lazy Bermudians. There are lazy Puerto Ricans, lazy English people, lazy everybody. And
that's right.
It's for me, for sure, that's not a general description because most people are not.
That's not good. Not a useful way to talk about the problems that we have.
But the question is, are you Bermudian? The answer is yes, because You are Bermudian, so fine.
The kudo? I don't know, man.
Anyway, no worse. One of the comments, though, from I think the last call, maybe the one before that, was in terms of Bermuda did not have to go and get it, but Last week, the Premier did clarify or emphasize the fact that government could have chosen not to participate in the corporate income tax regime, but to do so would have disqualified many of the local players from being here. And so there would have been a risk to not participate because other countries did not do so.
It would have made it very complicated for the companies that already operate here.
Exactly.
Actually, by doing this, it's made their lives easier because they can now file their taxes in one place. Mm-hmm. If we didn't do it, they'd be busy filing taxes for the money they made in Bermuda based on the original country it came from. Mm-hmm. That's why we would say they actually wanted it.
Yes.
Otherwise, they'd have like an administrative nightmare.
Gotcha. And so
now they want it, but they also want to figure out how to minimize its impact on them because they're businesses and that's what businesses do.
Sure. And you made the point too, and I think it's important for the listening audience to understand that, like, when a rule is put in place, there are guidelines around those rules, and there are people that are hired to make sure that you come as close as possible to that guideline, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, we have people that specialize in tax all over the place to make sure that you only pay what's necessary and not as I say, not a penny more. And so that's not a problem in that sense. So good. Now let's touch base on the debt repayment. So at this point in time, there are various tranches of debt to be repaid. The first amount is due, or the next amount is due is next January at $605 million. When government sent out the pre-budget report, it was going to pay back $500 million, and now in the actual budget is $605 million, which is the full amount that's due next January. Any comments or questions or concerns about that?
I was very surprised that they only planned the 500 because it meant we were not off to a good start. Let's be honest.
In the pre-budget report.
Yeah, let's be honest. This all this money that we're getting, and we couldn't even figure out how to get the first debt tranche paid off. That's not a good start. So they came to their senses or whatever. I don't know we don't get the ins and outs of the thinking process.
So actually, what was interesting is that.
So I was glad to see the 605 come in, but now I'm concerned about the other 1.1 on top of that. That's due at the end of 29, beginning of 30.
Right. And the Premier, the minister did clarify that one of the reasons is that the amount of money that was transferred from the fund into the consolidated fund was actually higher than anticipated, and that's why they now have the extra money to pay off the full tranche of $605 million. And I think that's another comment, which we know from the political point of view, right, is that in the House we get animated, and to be honest, for me it was a wonderful thing in terms of what I call it the spontaneity of the debate. You get passionate about it, and you say things that sometimes don't necessarily listen to the other side. But he did explain as to why they went from the $500 million to the $605 million. So, but my question is, are you comfortable that at least the full amount that's next due is going to be paid off? The full $605
for the one in a year from today. Yes.
Gotcha.
But like I said, pretty nervous about the next ones because the government's own plans. Like I mentioned, they have people may not realize the budget we talk about is for next year, which starts in April 1, actually 26, 27, and then they call it a medium term something. It means next year, the year after, and year after that. 3 years of budgeting at a high level.
Yes,
that framework is already about $250 million short of the plan you would need to get that whole 1.7 due before it's the 600 plus another 1.1 due around 2030. That's what I'm worried about.
And just to be clear, is that the government debt is not like but it is not a mortgage. It's the amount that's due, and you cannot really pay it off. You pay interest in the meantime, and you pay the principal off when it's due. And so the comment would be that if government does not pay off the full amount, they'll pay off what they want and refinance the balance. And so either way, even based upon the government plan, some of the debt will be paid off, be repaid, which means that the actual interest would start to decrease in any event.
Yes. Yeah.
Assuming, but it depends upon obviously
that's correct.
The new interest rate.
But within 4 to 5 years, given all the CIT money, we can't even get our debt paid down halfway.
Well, again, I mean that's
not a good start, man.
And I'm smiling now because that goes back to what you said in terms of we don't know the number, but by then the number will be known, and the government has said they're going to use the 70% to repay the debt, and so there is still a reasonable probability that the money will be there to pay it off. So it's not saying it's not going to be there. It's a question now of waiting to see what takes place. And also, of course, a different regime because the minister is not going to be minister anymore.
You're not wrong. Well, that's a whole nother topic.
Well, careful.
So I'm gonna put that one. I'm gonna put a pin in that one.
Sure.
I feel very strongly, and the OBA feels very strongly, and a lot of people in Bermuda actually who are non-politically affiliated, but who are experts feel very strongly that we must get our debt reduced to a reasonable level.
Sure.
Because let's say something happens. I know there's plans on the bridges, but let's just say we need to do some major project or whatever.
Yeah.
You typically will have to fund that through borrowing. We need to get the debt shrunk down so that we have flexibility to borrow more if we need to, when we need to. Right now, we're just stuck with it. It's just on our backs.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. And also, I mentioned that $100 million, right, of interest. Next year will be $100 million of interest, right? Let's get that paid down because we'll get another $25 million of cash could be used for other stuff next year.
Sure.
Let's get that debt, continue to pay it down and free up that money. And it'll be like a sort of flywheel effect, right?
Yes. So. And I guess, without pushing too hard on this, it's that so next year they pay off $605 million, right? And then let's just say, round number, the next tranche in 3 years is $1 billion.
Yeah.
And government has, say, $600 million. Okay, you pay the next $600 million and then you borrow another $400 million. So no matter what, the debt is going to be repaid at a reasonable time frame. Well, and if I remember correctly, the government plan is that 10 years.
10 years is too slow, man.
No, well, I'm saying I'm not arguing, but I'm saying in this case, it's relevant, right? Or relative, I should say.
We have a different perspective here, I really feel like the government has been incredibly constrained in what it's been able to do because of the debt.
Well, we agree, and there's no question about that.
And so for me, that's one of the biggest priorities to get that down. The faster you can get that down, the faster you can get helping people better. That's it. And so I think I have a more sense of urgency around that, and people like Craig Simmons, Nathan Kowalski, frankly, all the CIT taxpayers are a little bit like, look, we'd love to see you use this money to get that debt way down, because it's going to be much, much more better for you. It's like getting a bonus, right? If you work in a job where you get a bonus.
So yeah.
And do you go out and you spend that money on a car or, some things, or do you say, you know what? I'm going to pop that on the mortgage and bring that mortgage down.
And I'm not.
So it's a kind of financial psychology, right?
When is the finance going to be debated?
Friday
coming. So next week, whatever. Maybe
Friday night.
Yeah, okay. Because it'll be interesting to listening audience to tune in, and a lot of people it's boring, whatever, but it'll be interesting because it's going to allow the general public to tune in to really see what the various comments are, and hopefully tonight is like a precursor to that in terms of just comments and that kind of thing.
But let me give you like a concrete example of why it's so important that we can get some of this debt down and have that interest money. We're always talking on the OBA about targeted support, right?
Yes, that's coming up.
There's a ton of need in the country, right? And our concern is that this budget is kind of giving some money away that doesn't need to be given away and could either be used for debt or used to help people who need it more than they're already getting. You see what I mean? So it's about priorities and how you would focus your spending.
And one smile, by the way, for your debate on Friday is to try to quantify that in terms of, we take the point that there's some people that are going to get a break that don't need it.
Well, right? I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, so if you can't quantify it because...
Yeah, let me quantify
let me ask questions. So based upon your comment, right, would be how much money would be saved based upon what you call the targeted reductions, as opposed to a blanket reduction. For example, there's like fees for your car.
Yeah.
The Balco piece, I think, is a misnomer because for Balco, they're reducing the taxes, which means that the overall import duty on the fuel that Balco purchases, what the reduction is, not on an individual person. So that's a different one. But take the car, for example.
Well, no, it goes straight on your bill.
I'm saying, so it's not...
So let me give you guys an example, right? Okay. Because the Premier likes to talk in averages, but there is no average person. Let's say you're at the lower economic rungs.
Yes.
You got a Class A car, you got a smaller house. I did a worked example. Okay. You would have started off prior to 2022, you would have paid $304 a year to license that car. Under the savings proposed by the government, 10% in 22, another 10% this year, that you will save $58 over 3 years. $58. Now, if you got that fancy IB job, because the Premier always likes to talk about how many Bermudians work in IB, and you drive a nice Class H, got one of those new Toyotas, you would have started off at $1,678 for your license fee, and under all the changes, it's gone down to $1,359. You would have saved $320.
Right.
5.5 times as much as that person who's struggling just to put gas in the car. Now let me turn to Belco.
So, but
let me.
okay.
You asked.
Let
me turn to Belco, right? Because I want people to know we can't think in averages here.
Sure.
Now let's say you have a big house, and you don't like your Belco bill, but it's not like you're struggling to pay it every month.
Yes.
You can pay it. You just don't like it. I picked 1,700 kilowatt hours. Let's just say I know a guy.
Okay.
Let's just say I know a guy. That might be his monthly bill on average, right? Over the 3 years.
So his monthly bill is how much?
1,700 kilowatt hours.
And how much does it translate to a bill?
I don't actually have that number. I got the savings in here.
Go ahead.
But his savings over 3 years, based on all the proposals from the government, would be $912.
Okay.
That's over 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's say you have a smaller house. You don't let your children run the air conditioning because Belco, 600 kilowatt hours a month.
Yes.
Your savings over the whole 3 years of all the government proposals, $322. So that person with the big house is saving 2.8, almost 3 times as much as you. Add that up with that car, that person with the big house and the big car, over that time period, thanks to the blanket government tax breaks, has saved $1,231. And that person with the small car and who doesn't even like to turn on the air conditioner only saved $380.
Right.
3.2 difference. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm smiling,
it doesn't make sense, man.
And I'm smiling, right? Because
it doesn't make sense.
And so for me, right?
I gotta finish this.
Sure.
And the Premier, he says, oh, well, it's going to be complicated. This is the fintech guy.
Yes.
I don't want to hear about it's going to be complicated for Belco to figure out how to do this or for TCD to figure out how to do this. I want to hear about how we're going to make it possible for the people who have the least to get the most breaks. And these breaks are the opposite.
Right. And
They're the opposite. I am going to get a bigger break than a guy who's struggling to find work. Just let's be honest.
Right. And so I smile now.
It makes me upset, man.
Understood. So I'm smiling. Like this is me. If I was in the house right now, I would say, listen, what you're saying is not complete in terms of. So we do all this stuff, right? What we need to understand is the complexity that's going to be necessary to do this targeted stuff. What will it save in total? Let's say $1 million, for example, right? Because what you're saying is that the money can be used to pay down debt or other things. And so I would want to know, and hopefully you get it done for Friday, is how much money are we talking about in total? Because if it's a small amount of money, it's not in the context of what's required to collect it, it doesn't make sense.
And so, you know what, Anthony?
You're not going to save
welcome the Premier to go and explain that to that gentleman.
No, I'm saying
who's only going to save $380 over the past 3 years.
Okay.
Where I'm going to save $1,200.
And now,
good luck with that, because I can tell you when I go to Spring Hill. I don't want to have to explain that.
But what the challenge do, right? And this is.
By the way, I don't have the detailed information.
Fine.
It's not available to someone like me because that's confidential information the government has. So I couldn't even answer the question.
But the interesting point is that, and this is weird. So I interviewed an economist maybe 2 weeks ago, right? And his point was that people are logical and they're not. So, for example, the Spring Hill person, and forgive me for using that as an example, you're not going to go on Spring Hill, for example, and find all Class A cars. You're going to find some of the big cars.
It's a mix.
And so, therefore, some of the people that may be low income will save the big number because they have a big car. But that's not my point. It would be interesting, though, for example, to say that government's trying to use money, right, for larger savings, for example, let's say $5 million. And so if what you're saying, the targeted program does not raise a lot of money, it may be a misnomer. And that's what I'm saying as a politician, right? For the public to understand, we have to be more complete in our conversations around this. So That's my point. I'm not arguing, but that's my point.
Why not say, hey, you take your payroll tax slip up to Belco, and based on your payroll tax band?
Because that wouldn't happen. That's. I'm not going to take my payroll.
Why not?
I'm not going to take my pay information to Belco. No way.
What, just the band. You go up to the payroll tax office. They'll give you a little certificate says you're band ABC. You submit that to Belco, and you the person who needs the break.
Remember, the tax commission does not know how much money I make because you don't submit that to them.
So
you'd have to be your employer, and so therefore you know.
The employer can give you a certificate. It doesn't matter.
But I'm saying I'm smiling now.
This is serious. This is serious because this is what totally vexes me. And you're making excuses. No, I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I'm not saying it's not a little complicated.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's not a little complicated. You know what? Bob Richards put in place the first progressive payroll tax in Bermuda.
Granted.
And I bet people said, I don't know, Bob, that's a little OBA. Black OBA finance. I gotta check my box.
And that's all fine.
And I'm sure people are like, I don't know, MP Richards, that's gonna be complicated. We're gonna have to program the systems. Come on, man. It's 2026. We can solve these problems.
Yes.
And the premier's going on about we're going to have the fintech economy. You cannot go on like that and then say like it'll be too complicated to figure out how to give people who have less money a bigger break.
Okay, my last smile.
Sorry.
When I say smile, my last comment is this, right?
As you can see, I really am fired up about this.
Get ready for Friday. Because my thing is that I think we collectively agree, right, that there's no way that the average person is going to go to Belco and say, I make X amount of money, and show them how much they make, and therefore get a reduction, because we are very private about what we earn.
They can get a certificate from their employer that says they're in payroll tax band A, B, and C, or whatever.
Well, again, I mean, that's for you to decide on Friday, but I wanted to make the point that unless we're talking about substantial enough amounts of money, then it may not be practical. But you did answer the question or make the comment in terms of you don't have access to the detail to quantify what your targeted program would generate, and that's the point. And that's a fair comment. I didn't realize that you would not have it, or you're not able to get an estimate to be able to say that. Listen, for the OBA, if you adopt our targeted program, you will save, say, $2 million or $5 million, whatever, and that money can be used to do otherwise, because it may be that the targeted program will save $100,000, for example, which is a very small amount of money in the context of trying to assist other people. That's my only point, and that is what it is. All right, so I'm smiling. Caller, thank you for your patience. What's your question or comment?
Well, being you brought this up, that sounds like income tax that the gentleman is trying to use as a way of saying that...
that's been recommended. And one quick second. Hold on one second. Call, hold on one second. Call, I know you're calling from overseas. I'm going to let him finish first before I take your call. So you may want to hang up and call back. I'll see it because the line for overseas is different, but I'll see the one. Go ahead, caller.
Okay. What I'm saying is that what he's talking about should come up in the discussion when it comes to income tax.
Yes.
When it comes to this new tax, that money that we just have received, that's for everybody in the country, black, white, pink, blue, no matter where you are working, because all of Bermuda, all of the Bermudians that's out there working is a part of the infrastructure of this country when it comes to the international insurance business. All of it.
Okay, well, let him comment in terms of his. Let him comment then on his thoughts about income tax.
Everybody should get a share of that. And when it comes to the discussion of income tax, that's when we can make these types of discussions. But
let him. Hold on, caller. Let's ask him.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. What are your thoughts about income tax? They've been recommended by the Tax Review Committee.
I think about a couple of different ways.
Sure.
I talked about my concerns that we're not going to have the money to pay all this debt due in 2030. And I gave examples of how much the current spending is growing in the budget.
Yes.
To me, and I use the consultant's example as something I'm particularly concerned about.
Yes.
The government is growing spending, going with an uncertain new source of funds, and they're already asking floating trial balloons about adding a new tax. Because I think that they see the writing on the wall that the spending that they're growing may not even be sustained by this budget that they have, including the education minister at the Chamber of Commerce budget breakfast on Monday said the schools need $10 to $20 million each, and was asking the private sector to adopt the school. When we just have the biggest increase in revenue this country's ever seen, over $700 million, and now the Minister of Education's out there asking private companies to punk up money for the schools. Do you see? This is what
Right.
We're talking about adding another tax, and we just got $700 extra million. So that's number one.
Okay, and just to, again, I'm smiling again because hopefully this is prime you for your Friday commentary, because that's two different things. In terms of the corporate income tax, right, in the budget, it does talk about the fact that that's not going to be used for regular ongoing expenses. It's not going to be used at all for current account expenditure, right?
But they're covering up, but they have picked up $130 million of interest. So that's $130 million.
Which is going to be reduced down to 100 to start with.
But this year, that's $130 million. Mm-hmm. Where did it all go? You see what I'm saying? Like, and then to be asking the private sector to plunk in money for the public schools.
That's a separate. Well,
no, it's not, because it tells you the government doesn't have enough. Even with all the money they have, they don't think they have enough money to do what they need to do.
Let me just declare my interest in terms of my wife's a school principal.
Right.
And I know a lot of people in these.
By the way, I'm talking about the minister.
No, fine. I'm just saying that. So the idea of the private sector funding schools is not new. We all know that they pour millions of dollars into the private schools, and so it's not unheard of in terms of there being money spent to provide education. That's for sure. And as you said earlier, right, one of the requirements for IB is to have schools for the children of the employees.
They have the same concerns we have.
And I was smiling because I know, I won't call the name, of course, but there is a senior member that works in IB who has chosen for their children to go to public school as opposed to private schools, because they want the children to have to have a wider school experience than going to the private sector. Anyway, but that's my point. My point, rather, is really going to be about a matter of it's not unprecedented for the private sector to actually fund schools. It happens.
I'm not saying it's unprecedented.
Right, it happens.
But what I'm saying, it's unprecedented to ask for more money when you just got the biggest revenue windfall in Bermuda's history. The other, going back to the payroll tax thing, is, in some theoretical universe, maybe income tax, personal income tax, maybe that's the answer. We're not really in that theoretical universe. We are where we are, and a lot of things have to change. So let me give you an example, right? We know a lot of people, they have a rental unit on their property, and they've structured their family's finances so that that rental unit is part of paying the mortgage and funding their retirement.
Yes.
Now you throw a personal income tax on top of that. Now they're going to have to declare that rental income. Okay, and pay tax on that. So what is that going to do for their personal financial situation? Are they going to have to raise rents? What if it's rent? You see how all these pieces fit together.
Sure. But you do
really complicated.
But with that, of course, the income tax would mean the income tax comes in, other taxes fall away. So custom duty, for example, listing will fall away, and that's the balance. So that in Bermuda, we have the almost like what I call a value-added tax. In the U.S. and others, they don't have that, and so therefore, one of my big concerns, rather, is that in Bermuda, the duty on cars is crazy. In terms of 100%, then 150%, right? And so that will fall away, for example. So there would be a balance, and we didn't get to it last week with the Minister of Finance. But the idea again is to have these non-accretive things. And so if you bring in income tax, you reduce other taxes because that's the balance. And as you know, well, I'm not saying you know, but I mean, you appreciate would be that there are many people right now that have huge amounts of income that's not at all part of the tax system. And so that's the idea. So you reduce the percentage, it can be very, very small, to capture these other sources of income. So it's not necessarily unfair. And also, the biggest thing is that it has been recommended that we put in place payroll income tax in Bermuda. So let me do this real quick. The caller from overseas, welcome to Insight. What's your question or comment?
My question or comment relates to MP Decuto was talking about target support.
Yes.
My personal dilemma, like many other Bermudians, is that my parents are house rich and cash poor. Mm-hmm. They're 91 years old, 87 years old, and barely, from an affordability point of view, able to survive. Where they live, there are multiple other Bermudians like them that are affording this affordability crisis. As well aware, so many Bermudians have immigrated or emigrated overseas. So my question relates, or my comment is that I really support MP's Decuto's approach to having target support. From my perspective, it looks like my parents, based on the economics, are really in a regressive tax regime. I come from the old school of finance with Eugene Cox and Sir David Gibbons, where it had let up. But see, my concern is that I don't hear that. I don't hear it. I'm concerned. I come to Bermuda 6 times a year. I look at how people's living. Those fundamental issues and concerns are not being accurately addressed. So when the benefit goes to the opposite side, that's what we're living in this United States. The rich are getting richer and the middle class has shrunk. The Bermuda middle class has, from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, has basically, in my opinion, is probably about 10%. None of my friends that are my age in the 60s that are baby boomers have any cash. They're struggling.
Right.
So my concern is what can be done so that we can see a better Bermuda, because we're struggling.
Got you. And if I may call it, going back to the property rich and cash poor, that means the house that your parents earn is paid off, but they don't have much cash?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
It's a 3-bedroom house.
Sure.
Oh yeah, you've got.
And they're in their 90s. They have to live there. They have a car.
Yeah.
When they buy groceries, they come back with a bag of groceries that's $100.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And my father is a retired civil service policeman.
Yes, I got
with
you.
limited income. So it's and let me talk about the house, the affordability of the house.
Yes. Okay.
So when I hear these comments, my concern is how is it impacting the average Bermudian, and I'm not getting any answers. I don't hear any solutions. I hear it from a political point of view, a lot of rhetoric, but I don't see the execution. And what my concern is with this whole progressive or regressive taxation system and this CIT tax.
Yes.
For me, past performance is an indicator of future results.
Gotcha.
Bottom line, I don't have a lot of confidence in this.
Sure.
I'm just hoping that we can come up with some concrete plans and be able to execute on these ideas that you two gentlemen are talking about.
Sure.
That's my concern.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm doing tonight what I don't like to do, which is give a lot of different comments, because that's not what I like to do. But anyway, do you have any comments about the situation whereby someone might be asset rich and cash poor?
Anthony, I know you used to canvas, so you know what it is when you walk around the neighborhoods and you can see it. Mm-hmm. Okay. You know the work, for example, required to paint a roof.
Yeah,
right? You know how much it costs to pay someone to do that, and you can think about this gentleman's parents, and they're probably not in that. They may not have the money to have someone do that for them. They're not going to get on the roof.
Right.
Right. We know that inflation since 2017 is 14%. We know that the median salary has only gone up 10.8% over that time, and and that includes the people like the managers and stuff, the IB people who's gone up much faster.
Yes.
We know for many jobs, blue collar jobs, service jobs, labor jobs, their salaries have gone up a lot lower than inflation, and that's what he's talking about. The bag of groceries. We know about the energy cost right now is like 89% higher than the Caribbean average, the highest, and if we consider ourselves in the Caribbean for that benchmark, and three times the global average, and that's just, so a lot of people don't feel that squeeze in the top half, but the people in the top half are feeling that squeeze disproportionately.
Gotcha. Caller, please be patient. My question to you, MP Kudu, is what do you do in terms of when you prepare, right, to make sure your comments and that's relevant and understood by, because I say the same thing to, say, MP Haywood or Minister Haywood when he explains the the CPI, for example, is to find ways whereby whatever they're saying is understood by the general public. What do you do to do that?
Well, first you got to study all the statistics, the books, and then I try to relate it to things that come up when I talk to people, when I canvass, or we discuss in my caucus, or even with my family and friends. I try to make concrete examples, things like that. Honestly, when you walk around in the neighborhoods in Bermuda, you can just tell.
Okay, fair enough.
You can just tell what's going on with each family's situation. You can tell if they've got the walls painted. They either have time and energy to do it, or they don't because they're working multiple jobs, or they have the cash to pay someone to do it, or they don't. When I started when I started canvassing, look, I'm a lucky guy. I'm in a very fortunate situation. Okay, someone say you got a silver spoon in your mouth. Fair enough. Whatever. It is what it is. And if you don't think carefully, you might say, well, how come these people don't keep their house up? What's wrong with them? And then you get to figure out, you say, oh, right. They're working 2 jobs. They're tired.
Okay.
They maybe have an illness. They're not getting properly cared for. Do you see what I mean? Their situation is not what I realized. Okay. And they're under a lot of pressure. And so how do we, and some of these problems are really hard problems, and some of the government solutions, we're behind. We support many of the things. We support it when they were raising the pensions for the seniors. We're supporting the seniors' health care. We're saying go further. Okay. Only they're doing 15 million when the Tax Reform Commission recommended 30. But there's, for example, you say, we can get the other 15 million from Dakudo. Well, there's another $15 million of consultants in the finance ministry. I'm going to say, people say, well, what would you do? I'm telling you what I would do. Take that 15, add on the 15 already, and get to the 30 for seniors.
Again, I have no idea in that sense. It'll be interesting to, again, hopefully I make the time to listen on Friday, because that'll be a question to understand what is the makeup of the $100 million, because it may be, for example, a lot of that is the CIT regime that's been set up, for example. Maybe we'll see that. The comment I wanted to make for the caller is, with the senior parents, would be to understand, or what's the plan for the houses from the parents, because in my professional career some time ago, there's a comment in terms of understand that, because a prominent Bermudian person told me that, Anthony, you do not necessarily, as a parent, right, your children they're not guaranteed to get what the parents had. And so therefore you have responsibility to understand the financial situation and do your best to assist them, because mom and daddy die, I get a free house that's worth X $100,000. And so do I do anything now to assist them? I'm not a proponent of the reverse mortgage, by the way. However, I understand how that works. But if that's done, it's got to be done in a very sensible way. However, there is a process by which, depending upon your circumstances, you can be added on through a voluntary conveyance and pay your parents some money for that, and they can live off that for the rest of the years. But that is a sensitive conversation in terms of how you can start to plan for those eventualities. So I'll leave it at that.
You should do anything legal. You should get legal advice that's looking out for you.
For sure. And for the parents.
Well, I mean, as the parent, I'm talking from the parent situation.
Okay, good evening, caller. Thank you very much for your patience. And for the listening audience, thank you for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. Again, a very interesting conversation, very involved, involved conversation with MP Doug Dakudo, Shadow Minister of Finance. And I must confess that I'm putting in more comments than I normally would, but this is one of my passions, and everybody knows that when I was in the house, this is really my time to really get going. So I apologize for those comments. But anyway, caller, what's your question or comment?
Yes, good evening, Anthony, and good evening, Mr. Dakudo. Anthony, just before I start, I'm in my late 60s.
Yes.
My wife and I, we both just retired not about a year or so apart.
Congratulations.
We both were in professional jobs, my wife in the private sector, myself in government. We have one child, which is just going 32. Wow. You mentioned about the private sector putting in funds to the boost of public education, and that things like that has been done before. I'm not sure if I so agree that the private sector should be doing that. We have something in place where every person is supposed to be chipping in order to actually pay in the public system. I feel like I have paid both. Our child's godparents were all educators, principals. I'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
So we had a lot of guidings that they would tell us that they could not say to the general public or on air because they would have lost their job. Our son was put in private school from the information I got, mainly because of how poor the public school system is. But and he's got a first class education. He also has a top job in designing. But I don't really totally agree that the private system should be pouring more funds into the public system. We need to find a way. That's why it's called public. The government, I pay taxes. I feel like I pay taxes for somebody's child to go to the public system, and I have to pay out taxes for our child to go to private school. And he went to a private nursery, and he started at Salters from the beginning, not at 12 or 13 to go all the way through. Right. So I'm just elaborating that. I don't really agree with that.
How old is your child? How old is your child then?
Our son just went 32.
Gotcha, okay.
When he was getting ready to go to private school, that was when the middle schools were coming into effect. Yes. And we was told by, as I said, his godparents.
Yes.
Or both, he has two of his godparents, just to be a record, were good friends, principals. They were principals. They're both just not long retired.
Sure.
And he had two other godparents that also were top teachers. And they all, back then, they all told us, listen, middle school, which is not cut out to what, it's not going to be what you think it is. And because you have one child, we would recommend that you put him in private, and so be it. That's what we done. And I was a bit skeptical about the public education even before that. I'll just end on this note and whatnot. I have a close friend who's also he's still employed. Him and his wife have top government jobs. They have two daughters. And our daughters were going and were TNT me, and when they had to close, they both went to Delwood.
Yes.
And one was older than the other, so when the older one went to Bermuda College, the younger one was still going to Delwood, and he came to me and said, Stan, I'm not sure everything is going to plan with our daughter at Delwood.
Yes.
We may transfer her to a private school. I said, look, you got to do what you have to do. He says, my wife is going next week. She's made arrangements to go next week and sit in the class. So she went and sat in the class. And Anthony, she said, they knew the students were coming in and out of the class after saying to the teacher whatever they wanted. And she said, are you allowing this? She said, there's that when you learn, sit up your front. Yes. And this particular parent transferred that child to a private school. Sure. This was 2 years ago. So that, and this is not her say, this is what they basically told me.
Sure.
Direct. So the public system in some areas, and by me, and your wife is a principal, Anthony, so you know you can talk with her and you know some of this stuff. What I'm saying is factual. The public system isn't what it should be, and unfortunately, a lot of people are not blessed like my wife and I, or even say, what is the sacrifice to put that child to in a private school to make sure that they get the classroom hours. You have a lot of Bermudian children that when they learn, and yes, you have children, parents are behind them, they make it through the public system. They say, well, since I've got this education, since I've got this scholarship, but 80% of them are struggling because the system is not designed to cope with what's happening today.
All right, caller.
And on that note, thank you.
Thank you very much. So the listening public will know quite clearly that I don't support that. I think that the public education system does what it's supposed to do. If the parents are involved, of course it's not perfect. Not this private school perfect, right? But that's not tonight's discussion point. And, I can contact the Minister of Education to come on board and have a conversation at that time. But people know for sure that Anthony is a very proud supporter of public education from primary school all the way through to Bermuda College. My personal experience, my friends' experience, I know teachers, I know principals, my own children, and so I'm never going to support the idea that public education is not doing what's going to get done. And I've spent many, many summers overseas with my wife, for example. We spent 2 days going to buy stuff. And anyway, I'm not going there. Not tonight, but I do appreciate that each of us have an opinion. In this case, the caller believes that his children came out, went to private, and that's fine. They're blessed, and so we go from there. But MP the crew, that was way off topic. Sorry about that. What other point you made?
Let's see. Hot topic, not going to lie.
But not for tonight. The Shadow Minister is MP Ben, right?
Yes,
MP
okay. Smith.
So maybe we'll get him come on to talk about education at some point. So back to the budget. A lot of discussion right now about the CIT and the debt, and I think that those two things do underpin the Bermuda's finances going forward from a government point of view. The other point we started on with is about healthcare. So let's talk now about healthcare. I know that from the government side, it was that the hospital used to be funded based upon a fee-for-service model, is now going to a block grant. You have comments about that, and then we can go back to the original comment in terms of the minister has recently gave a ministerial statement in terms of putting in place legislation to prevent the elimination of competition.
All right. Which one do you want me to talk about first?
Well, I guess maybe the hospital, whatever you want in terms from a budget point of view for healthcare, so we can have a conversation.
All right. Well, I'll just repeat what we started with because I think it's important. The OBA, having observed this situation with all shores, which includes health, but also other private insurance, right?
Okay.
Vehicles, housing, and the size of that company in our market. One of our key themes of our reply is that we would say the local insurance market, because of its concentration, needs to be regulated. And the regulator should be controlling its rates. So that would mean the company would have to apply to change rates and provide the evidence and so forth. Right?
So just to clarify, so not just health insurance, all domestic insurance.
Yeah.
So home insurance, auto insurance, health insurance. There's a million ones, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
that's right. And that obviously would include like the situation with can they own doctors' offices and how does that operate, and what how can they to what extent can they control where you buy your medicines and stuff like that. Okay, and it doesn't always mean that your premium is going to go down, right? Because sometimes the underlying costs are what they are, and the owners of the insurance companies, right, the investors, they are entitled to a fair return.
Yes,
right, but they're also not entitled to take advantage of their monopoly position. I'm not saying they have a monopoly, but their market dominating position. Okay, so that's number one. And that idea, just to remind people, we've had that idea for a while, and our budget reply was actually sent to the printers even before this whole pharmacy thing came to light. Okay. So I think I said enough about that. All right, the block grant. Listen, we know that in the past there was concerns about the hospital not controlling its costs. If they get to charge whatever they want, obviously, and the insurers are just going to pay it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's not complicated to see why people would be concerned that would raise healthcare prices.
Yes.
So the original thinking behind the block grant was, hey, well, we're just going to give them a chunk of money. We do some analysis, say for all the things you need to do, for all the people, it ought to be whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So then, obviously, when you control someone's purse strings, they're a lot more motivated to spend more carefully, right?
Yes.
Okay. The problem with that is that block grant, it wasn't revisited. The amount was not properly, it should be renegotiated, right?
Okay.
And it wasn't. And then the hospital wasn't able to charge anymore for certain things. And they'd be like, well, we're just going to stop running those operating rooms. We're only going to supply the minimum things we're required to by law because everything we do extra just costs us extra. Mm-hmm. And then you have this problem where things like they have several operating rooms that they just won't open up and make available to doctors because there's no mechanism for them to charge it back, right? So then you have operating rooms not running that could be running. So then you have doctors in Bermuda who could do certain procedures, operations, they can't provide them here. Now people who need those operations are going to have to go overseas for them, which actually costs more for everybody than if they could do them here. So I'm not saying the thinking behind the idea was not good, was not properly intentioned, but we now see the result, and we see the hospital has been struggling with its budget, struggling to pay its workers, struggling to even make the most full use of its resources.
Okay.
Right? So it's clearly not working. So we got to change. So we say like shorthand fee for service basically means they do an operation, they charge you. Now that doesn't mean they can set whatever rate they want and things like that. You have to negotiate a fee schedule, things like that. It has to be fair, appropriate, and stuff like that. But we need to be taking advantage of all the resources at the hospital in a way that the hospital can be properly funded and those resources can be made available. And we know we're not there now.
Yes. Okay. So just a question. I was aware of the fact that the operating rooms themselves are not being used to the maximum. For example, not out of hours and that kind of thing. Would you support the idea of what I call a carve-out, whereby the hospital can almost offer the operating rooms on a fee-for-service basis and keep the block grant in place?
Well, now we're getting into the details of because there's other things that the hospital does that they don't do because they're not allowed to charge from, but they could do, that would allow them to make a little revenue to support like other things.
Okay.
So that sounds like something that could be worth discussing.
Okay.
But like the key point is what we're doing now, not working. Change it.
Okay. Because I know I don't know if it was last week or at some point, it's almost one of these things whereby the hospital became, I wouldn't say too successful, but I think they had on hand like $100 million of cash at some point, which means that money came out of the system.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a huge accumulation.
Like I said, like
so maybe make some adjustment.
Yeah, I mean that was clearly they should not be making cash. It's not supposed to operate at a profit. They shouldn't be, so clearly they were probably charging too much for some things or something, right? So that's why I talk about negotiated fee schedule and things like that.
And so I guess, and it may be unfair, but the question would be, you would support, generally speaking, then an idea of going back to fee for services, but at a lesser rate so that they don't accumulate that much cash, or somehow
at the appropriate rate.
Gotcha.
Look, I'm not a medical expert, so I don't, but there are a lot of experts who work in this area, and saying strictly, I appreciate it's actually not quite as simple as fee for service.
Sure.
That's just what we say to really say we need to make a change from what it is now.
Okay, fair enough. So you talked about that. Those two things are done.
We talked a lot about step-down facilities. That was in our platform in last summer. Okay. A step-down facility is like, let's say you have a surgery and then you need some recuperation time.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily need that acute care, but you can't go home. So you can have, there's different types of these facilities, but you can have skilled nursing care. You do your rehab work or whatever, and so it's a sort of intermediate place between that like acute hospital room that can take someone right out of the operating room or right out of the emergency room and going home. We think about the seniors who are in the hospital because they have nowhere else to go for a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to open that can of worms, but they need a place to go. Okay. We need more care like that as well. Those are also kinds of step-down facilities, whether it be seniors' homes where they can go sort of on a temporary basis while they may take longer to recover and stuff. So we support. They say that the government says they're going to do some of this. So that's an idea we've had for a while, and we support that.
Okay, I'm going to take this call and then come back to you, and let's talk about housing.
Yes.
Good evening, caller. Thank you for joining us here on Insight. What's your question or comment?
And good evening to you, Doctor, and
good evening.
The wonderful discussion that you're having.
Oh, I got your voice. Go ahead.
As a businessman, I know most times when a lot of businesses are not working properly, Doctor, do you think that the hospital and all the businesses here in Bermuda, and government in particular, are top-heavy? I'll leave that for an answer, please.
Sorry, say it again?
All the businesses here in Bermuda run and are too top-heavy.
Okay, got you.
Do you understand that?
Yes, too many management and not enough.
Yes, not enough workers, sort of thing. So, the wheels are not turning efficiently.
Okay. That's your question? Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's the question, I suppose, in terms of, you work in insurance, yes? And so, what's your comment, I guess? Flat or...
In international business, right, what happens is... if the premiums start going down, and it all naturally gets taken care of, right? People are gently laid off, or companies merge. There was just a merger, or not a merger. It was company A called company B. That was in the paper this week, and they're not going to hire extra people. That's just how it is, right? So in the private sector, I think that kind of takes care of itself. In the hospital, I'm not really qualified to speak to the details of the management, there versus the workers there. I do know they struggle to hire workers, nurses and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, worldwide part of the hospital, nurses, yes.
And then in the government sector, I think the government is struggling to hire the right people in the right places. And they're trying to get some reform in on how they organize their pay scales, and because they're competing with the private sector, and we have a sort of shrinking population in Bermuda. So I would say this, the budget is to grow the employees in government. Can't really support that, even though at a high level, because the population of Bermuda has shrunk. Now,
is it good numbers or good pay because they want to increase the pay to make it competitive?
Both. The numbers. the head count. And listen, it's hard to say a blanket thing because we know there are departments that are critical, that are short. You see what I mean? So even like, Bermudians' interactions with government is not uniform, right?
Yes.
There are, there's departments you can go to, you're like, I always have a great experience there because the staff there operates.
TCD. Didn't used to be.
And there's departments, I'm clearly not going to name them, people go to and they're like, always have a bad experience. So what I'm saying is but if you think about it at a high level, it doesn't seem right that the government will be growing staff while the number of working Bermudians is going down in total.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, but okay. And I do know, many years ago now, I did my own anecdotal comparison in terms of in the private sector versus government. At the professional level, when you first start in government, you get paid more than private sector. After maybe say 5 years or so, you get paid the same, but beyond that, you get paid a lot less. And so there's a need to rebalance that at some level.
Yeah, but it's also a very different kind of job.
Correct.
You have different kinds of job protections. You have a guaranteed pension.
That's interesting because what's your comment about the pension reform?
It had to happen, and we in the OBA were calling for it for a very long time. For the listeners, that's the public service pension, PSSF. That definitely had to happen, and we've supported that. I think the communications about that with some of the employees could have been better because I think some of them felt that they were getting shortchanged. But at a high level, it had to happen. They were running out of money. Next piece of homework for the government is social insurance. Has to happen. The OBA, we're at a high level, we talk about we need to use the CIT to pay down debt. For us, the pension liability and social insurance is included in that number.
Oh, well.
It's going to run out in the 2040s if they doesn't get reformed. We would support a one-time payment of CIT funds into that to help soften the impact of the reform. Because what reform means is always either payments in go up, payments out go down, retirement ages go later, and you also will probably adjust the payments to have to do with how much money you make.
So to take a step further then, again, preparation for Friday is that, so the OBA would say, with the CIT money, don't use it for regular operating expenses, but use it for debt, but debt includes the pension reform or the social insurance in this instance.
Yes.
And so wouldn't that then postpone the money available to pay down the debt if they use some of that money for social insurance in the interim?
We would have to spread it around because what's going to happen with the social insurance is some people are going to be feeling really put out that their retirement age has gone out or their contributions got to go up or the money they're going to get out is going to go down. Right, okay. and it's going to upset some people's long range planning. So, like I'm saying, we would support putting some money into that too. And you're right; it's going to be the trade off between this, and the other. But if the social insurance runs out of money, who's going to pony up? Government.
That's interesting then. In terms of your earlier comments about targeted reforms and whatever, would you support the idea, does the OBA, or have you had a comment yet, in terms of, for social insurance right now, we all pay the same amount of money no matter how much money we make. It's a flat dollar, $70-something a week, whatever it is, right? Would you support the idea of differentiated payments so that, for example, if I make more, I'll pay a higher rate than you might pay if you make less, but yet the benefits are not the same? Because I think that's a proposal from government to make some changes.
It's a pretty standard approach. I personally would. I haven't, we haven't had that caucus discussion, so I'm not going to say. I mean, the party definitely supports the reform.
Yes.
It definitely supports using CIT money. We haven't got quite that down in the weeds.
Okay.
But I personally would. And then you have to balance it out because always those people who put more in always feel they should get more out.
Right.
So you probably have to split the difference somehow to kind of have the least people be the least upset.
Okay. Now, that'd be interesting because, and just so the public knows, that's the idea is that right now I make, I don't know, 50,000, you make 200,000, and we pay the same social insurance and get the same amount of money out, as opposed to if you make more, you pay more, but the difference would be we all get the same amount of money out, but you pay more because you earn more, and that would be, as you said earlier, one of those targeted things because you know for sure how much money the person gets paid because it's paid by the employer
or
right away.
Maybe you get more, but not as much more as you paid in. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Okay, so you may pay twice as much, but not get twice as much benefit.
Something like that.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. And actually, going back, you said no, but I think the Tax Reform Commission did suggest or recommend payroll tax, by the way. I mean, income tax. So it's going to be interesting to see how that comes into it from a political perspective if we take on board some of the recognition and not others?
Well, we got to get to the next 5 years, man. Like we have enough things that we can change the dials on right now.
Yes.
And then let's see how we land in the next 5 to 8 years, and then we can kind of come back and take another look.
Okay. All right. Now let's go to some of the direct questions. I've been trying my best to manage them and ask questions as I go. This one is this one's just a general comment in terms of, for the parents in public schools, they say, but I guess it's all schools, their parents have to be more involved in their child's education. That's a key output as opposed to the physical school and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's easy to say that. You know, there were parents in situations that, they're jammed up. Mm-hmm. Not every parent is able to put into it what we would like them to or what they would like to. And we have to accept that.
Well, because one of my comments from before
could be they're working, 2 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They could have an illness, all kinds of things.
But what's been interesting, this is where people, they don't like these type of comments, is that by law we have vacation days, and we can all, as parents, take 1 vacation day per school year, for example, with school term for that matter, because it's that important. And clearly, the physical and visible presence of your parents makes a difference.
Oh, I agree.
For the long term.
I agree.
And you can imagine we all smile because when there is a school play or whatever, the children up on the stage, and they don't quite get into the actions until they see their parents, and then bam, they start to get turned on, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the same idea in my mind for education, that we can take 1 day off per school term and go to our schools if that's what's necessary, But again, that's a different conversation in terms of our commitment and necessary outcomes for our children. So what else you talk about? We're getting down to the end, by the way. It's amazing to be honest. And I'll say again, this has been a very fun conversation. It's not scripted. I never have scripted. It's always a conversation.
I'm enjoying it.
And so it's been quite wonderful. What's your comment in terms of the housing? Let's talk about housing.
Sure.
One of the comments that surprised me, by the way, is that more than half of the accommodation in Bermuda are under rent control.
Yeah, it's true.
That was amazing to me. I didn't realize that until maybe a year or two ago.
You can get the land valuation list, and you can see. 1, it's a hard problem. 2, we need a lot more right now. Some of the ideas we had is let's get some emergency housing going on disused government buildings right now. There are people who are struggling with just a place to stay in the short term. Let's do something very quickly for them. Is it going to be the most exciting place to stay? No, but it's going to be better than a tough situation. And then it's somewhere they could stay in a short term while they get sorted for a longer term. Maybe they need support, like the type that the charity home supports, skills, get back on their feet, whatever it is, right? So
what would be an example of that?
An old school building, right? Could be turned into like a dormitory or, modified slightly, add some bathrooms, whatever. Look, these are not long-term. This we'll call emergency housing, because there are people who need emergency housing. So that's one idea. We do not support the government's plan about the derelict properties, taking people's derelict properties. I know, at some 50,000-foot level, we get it. You drive around and say, well, let's do something with these buildings. Mm-hmm. The reason they're in the situation they're in is because they may have some complicated family stuff going on, legal stuff going on. The government, like I mentioned already, has a lot of unused property. The government can use that property to develop housing, to provide, and should work on that before it gets into taking property away from Bermudians.
So just a question. So that, for example, there is a derelict house in location A that needs windows, whatever. The government plans access to the premier last week also, by the way, that they're not planning to take the houses away from somebody. It's to take the unit, or the idea is going to be to rehabilitate the unit. Whoever owns it will still own it, but others will live in it. And then, so I would never lose the house per se.
Yeah, but what you find out is that the rent that you can charge versus the amount of money that has to be put into it means that it never makes its money back. That's why the BHC renovation program or whatever hasn't really expanded, because they found out that the amount of money they'd have to put into someone else's property to make it rentable is not really feasible to recover it through the rental that they wanted to charge. And then you have this problem, you're basically giving government money to a private owner. Right. So the government should just maintain the properties it has and use the properties it has and focus on that.
But again, to ask the question, there's like, so right now, there's a 2-bedroom house that needs some minor renovation. I guess my comment would be, isn't it more practical to do that than, say, change the school, because the house has everything it needs. So, bathrooms, it's just a matter of...
BHC does have like a ready-to-rent program.
Yes.
And when it's minor stuff, they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
The key is it's got to be minor, because the amount that the BHC has to put out, it has to be like small enough that, in some reasonable time, they can earn the money back from the rentals, and then the owner gets the property back. You see, if it's a big piece of work,
yes, the
time frame is so long to earn back that it gets very complicated as to, like, does the owner really ever get that property back? Will the rental income that the government or BHC could charge ever really earn enough?
It's interesting though, because there is a perspective, right, whereby government's not going to do it to get a return on it, but it's an investment to get the family in.
Yeah, but now you have government basically giving money to the owners of those houses.
Yes, but the other side of it is not. The emphasis is not giving money to me. It's more a matter of you do something to get people into his houses.
Let me put it another way. From this conversation, you can see it's actually pretty complicated.
Sure.
And I think everybody accepts the government already has a lot of property available that could be used, that could avoid these complications.
But are you talking about, for example, schools or houses that are available?
Lots, land, buildings that could be knocked down and rebuilt, buildings that could be renovated, repurposed.
That's interesting. Again, I'm listening to that debate because I guess intuitively now it's going to be, there's a physical house that's a little bit derelict that can be made really a lot faster than building a new house, even renovating a school, for example, because it is purpose built. I mean, like a dormitory, for example, is a challenge.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the emergency house. I'm now talking about normal houses.
Normal house, yeah, there's one down North Shore, for example.
You know what? You have a derelict house, and then you get into it.
Yeah.
Half the time you got to knock the thing down, rebuild the roof, redo the electrics. Like it always turns out to be more complicated and more expensive than you thought. And I think people who've done a project.
That's fair enough. And so I know that was the Minister of the Public Works and the Environment. He was here talking about these things. And so yes, your comment now is that the proposed legislation whereby government's going to look to adjust the law whereby these houses can be rehabilitated. The OBA in principle opposes it?
Yeah, I think with the history in Bermuda of people taking people's land, the complications around how to get the finances to work in a way that is practical and fair, and the fact that there are other properties, land, that could be used for that purpose means why even go there?
Okay, that's interesting. Okay,
that's our view.
I'm not sure when it's up for debate, but that's going to be interesting to listen to. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the hour. Sorry. Are there any particular points that you want to make that you want to re-emphasize, or that you want to make sure the listening audience hears, or before we get to...
The last point I want to make is that I think, my colleague, OBA leader Ben Smith, used the term cabinet glasses. Mm-hmm. These are the glasses that the cabinet ministers are wearing when they view what's going on in the economy. And it looks good. And it looks a little rosy. And while for many it is good, for many it's not. And we can't look at averages. We can't look at, the GDP for the whole island's up, because, as we outline in our reply, for a lot of people, it's not that good, and it has not kept up. And that's where we spend our energy thinking about what are the solutions. I'm glad IB is doing well. It's great for me. It's great for some people I know. And it's good for the island. But that doesn't mean we don't need to be doing a lot of work and actually spending our time and energy. How do we take care of the people who aren't in IB? How do we make sure their children get educated? How do we make sure the economy is working to create jobs for them? So let me leave it at that.
But with that, isn't there, for example, let's say, not you, but let's say a person that's a circumstance, right? They have a job, they need to maintain their property, they need to do whatever that's got to get done, and they don't have the time, so they pay somebody to do it. And so therefore, isn't that what I call not so much trickle down, but the spin-off effect, because you're not going to paint your house. I'm going to paint it for you, and the roof costs like $5,000, which is ridiculous, but that's what they cost. And so you're creating money.
Yeah, I agree. But the problem is statistics are showing us that the local economy shrunk after COVID and has not returned.
And that's a good point in terms of what's your thoughts about tourism?
We're like 30% down on air arrivals since before COVID. We need to go to town on that. We've had a real drop off in hotels, and even after accounting for Fairmont Southampton, we need to get some new investors here. While we see the Southampton Princess being worked on, we see the Elbow Beach Lauren being worked on. Those investors were already here. We need to get new investors in because we need to diversify the investors we have here. Remember the OBA brought in like 3 or 4. We had the Azure, we had the Lauren, we had the Hamilton renovation. We had the one up in, we had the St. Regis. How come in 8 years of this PLP government, there has not been a new hotel investor? That should be like a major priority for them to be out there, beating the bushes, finding investors, dragging them to Bermuda, and selling Bermuda to them. And so this is a smile for sure now, right? It's that. So do you take credit, or do you support the Fairmont Southampton renovation? That's like a massive, that's $500 million or something. The hotel renovation? Yes. The condo project is too crazy. Right. And so we supported a more scaled down version of that. Of the condos or the hotel? Of the condos. Good. And so the hotel coming online starting this year. Well, I hope. Next, well, it's partially the coming on in phases, right? That we accept will bring in new airlift for sure. Yeah? Yeah. So you support that, or? Of course we support getting the hotel open. Okay, gotcha. All right, no, fair enough. I'll leave it at that. Good evening, caller. You're going to probably be our last caller tonight. What's your question or comment? Thank you for joining Insight.
Great. I'm glad of that. I've just listened to the opposition talking about exactly about the other hotels that's come on board.
Yes.
I don't see where it's really done a whole lot. I mean, Lauren hasn't brought a whole lot to the table. We have decreased room than what we had before. Again, you look at the St. Regis. Again, price point.
Yes.
That hasn't really done a whole lot of justice as well. I'm trying to give them a lot of kudos, but they haven't really done nothing.
Well, that's interesting in terms of, do you have an idea?
They've taken away bed nights.
Right.
They haven't added bed nights. Our problem is bed nights.
Correct.
But do you have do you have a sense of the occupancy of St. Regis?
Well, the occupancy hasn't really been there. I've worked with tour operators for some time. I'm the local representative for many of them.
Okay.
So I can appreciate them saying what the OBA has done.
Yeah.
They have decreased room nights.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting, caller, to message me if you can on WhatsApp, and maybe have a conversation offline, and I can have a show about tourism, because that's critical in terms of diversification. We all accept that the IB is doing well. To know in more detail what's happening from a tourism point of view, because tourism might have less of an impact, but employs more people, that's for sure. That's right. So can you message me?
I will definitely do that.
Yep, 538-8683. Thank you.
I mean,
you're welcome.
Yeah, he's right about the bed nights, but I'm not sure it's the OBA's fault, because it's the PLP been in government for 8 years.
But again, I mean, that's getting politics now, because for me, it's nobody's fault per se, because it's a private sector. And I will say this to you, and I've said it many, many times now, it's about, and we're not going to go there. The PLP has been in power recently, but not historically, and they don't have the full economic authority. Political power, yes, but economic power, no. There's no question about that. So we leave it on there.
Okay.
No, that's true. I mean, clearly, the PLP doesn't have economic power the way that we would expect it to be. But in any event, I would say thank you tremendously for coming on board. And I'll say to the listening audience, the show is designed for to increase numeric literacy or financial literacy, right? And the promo says when people come on board, it's to put on the Bermuda hat, because we have different perspectives. And people would know that I was criticized for not having always PLP, for example, right? But the show is not a political show. It's meant to bring ideas to the table and to debate, to have a conversation. And tonight, I think, almost epitomized what the show is about, because you and I may not have the same, well, we don't have the same political philosophy, but we can talk and have a conversation. And to be honest, tonight's been very, very fast. Like, the clock is like, boom, going real fast.
I've really enjoyed
it. Comfortable conversation.
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed your questions, the callers' questions. I think it's been a stimulating conversation. And I want to say thank you very much, Anthony, and thank you to the callers and the listeners.
Thank you again. And so we look forward to your debate on Friday. What time is Friday night, you say?
Yeah, I don't know.
Late. Okay,
it's going to be late, probably from like 3:30 maybe for finance.
Got you. But I want to encourage the listening audience, because this week what will happen Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, first for the House and then in the Senate, whereby they'll go through whatever has been chosen for ministers in detail and ask more questions. And I trust there's the opportunity for both sides to really have a conversation to inform the public, both questions and answers, as opposed sometimes what happens is the minister takes up all the time, which is not beneficial, to be honest.
No.
And so hopefully we have a good interchange and people listen in, they have conversation, and I'll do my best to have shows around the various topics. So far, healthcare is definitely on the line, and education for sure, based upon the comments tonight. And we will see what goes on between now and the rest of the month. And I will say that the budget has to be approved in final by March 31st in order for it to come in effect April 1st. Last year there was a difference because the election took place, and legally they were able to extend it and they passed the budget in May. But this year, based upon normal circumstances, it's got to be done by March 31st to allow the government to then start to spend money. And so looking forward to the process. And again, Bermuda, if you're out early or late, please wear a high visibility vest, a light or something, because you need to be lit up so people will see you. People are driving vehicles sometimes at high speed, they're tired, distracted on their phones, whatever. And the idea is to avoid a collision and any personal injury. So again, Bermuda, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on Magic 102.7 or your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. I look forward to next week for another stimulating discussion. And again, to MP Doug Dukudo, the opposition member for finance. This has been a tremendous conversation, and I wish you well on Friday, and I'll listen in.
Thank you.
And clearly, when opportunity arises, let me know. Come on back, have another conversation about whatever subject you want to talk about. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate
Live
that.
on YouTube.
Good night to you too.
Subscribe now. Bermuda Live on YouTube. Subscribe now.